I always wanted to be a park ranger, for as long as I can remember. Being out in nature, hiking, camping, and fishing, that was pretty much all I wanted to do as a kid. So when my mom died last month after a long battle with cancer, I figured it was time to finally make that dream happen. Not exactly how I planned it, but life rarely works out the way you expect. The drive to Oregon took 3 days. I could have done it faster, but I wasn't in any rush. Just me, my old Toyota pickup, and whatever random thoughts popped into my head as I watched the landscape change from the flat plains of the Midwest to the mountains of the Northwest. I didn't play much music, didn't feel like it, just drove with the windows down, letting the wind drown out everything else. By the time I pulled into the ranger station parking lot, I'd gone almost 24 hours without talking to another human being. My voice felt rusty when I finally used it. "I'm looking for Robert Hayes," I said to the woman at the front desk. "I'm David Mitchell, here about the fire lookout position." She pointed me down a hallway, and I found the office with his name on the door. I knocked twice. "Come in," a gruff voice called from inside. Hayes was exactly what I expected a veteran forest ranger to look like. Weathered face, salt and pepper hair, and the kind of tan you only get from spending decades outdoors. He stood up from behind his desk and shook my hand firmly. "Mitchell, good to meet you in person." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down. We've got some paperwork to go through before I send you up to that tower." I sat while he pulled out a folder and started going through the basics. Pay schedule, radio protocols, emergency procedures. Standard stuff. I nodded along, signing where he told me to sign. "You ever done fire lookout work before?" he asked, not looking up from the papers. "No, but I've done plenty of camping and hiking. I'm good with being alone." Hayes grunted. "Being alone is one thing. Being isolated is another. Your nearest neighbor will be 15 miles away. Nearest town, 30. You sure you're ready for that kind of solitude?" "That's kind of the point," I said. "I need some space to think." He looked up at me then, studying my face. "Your application mentioned recent family loss. I'm sorry about that." I just nodded, didn't trust myself to say more. Hayes cleared his throat. "Well, the tower's been empty for a while now. Last guy we had up there was Thomas Garrett. Good man, Irish fella, experienced." "What happened to him?" I asked. Hayes's expression tightened slightly. "Disappeared. About 3 years ago. Just up and left one night. Never found him or his gear. He just left." "That's what we figure. Happens sometimes. The isolation gets to people." Hayes shuffled some papers. "Course. The locals have their own ideas. Say the tower's cursed or some nonsense." I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Cursed? Seriously?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Yeah, well, small towns and their superstitions. You know how it goes." He closed the folder and stood up. "Anyway, your truck should make it up the service road just fine. I've marked the route on this map. Radio check-in is every morning at 8 and evening at 6. Any fires or emergencies, you call them in immediately." I took the map and nodded. "Got it. Good luck up there, Mitchell. Hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." The drive up to the tower took almost 2 hours on rough Forest Service roads. My truck bounced and rattled over every rock and rut, but it held together. The trees got thicker as I climbed higher, until finally the road opened up to a small clearing with the fire lookout tower standing in the center. It wasn't much to look at. Here's just a square cabin perched on stilts about 30 feet off the ground, with a wraparound deck and windows on all sides. A steep staircase zigzagged up to the entrance. I parked next to it and just sat there for a minute, taking it all in. This was going to be my home for the next 3 months. I grabbed my duffel bag and a box of groceries from the truck and made my way up the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, the whole structure swaying slightly in the breeze. When I reached the top, I found the door unlocked, just like Hayes said it would be. The inside was simple but functional. One room with a small kitchen area, a desk with radio equipment, a single bed in the corner, and a tiny bathroom. Windows wrapped around the entire space, giving a 360-degree view of nothing but forest and mountains as far as I could see. "Home sweet home," I muttered to myself, dropping my bag on the floor. I spent the next couple hours bringing up the rest of my stuff and getting settled. There wasn't much to unpack, mess, just clothes, some books, my laptop, though Hayes warned me the solar power was limited, and a few photos I wasn't ready to look at yet. I put those in a drawer without taking them out of the envelope. The kitchen cabinets were stocked with basic supplies: canned goods, rice, pasta, coffee. I added my own groceries and organized everything neatly. The routine of it was calming, putting things in order when everything else in my life felt so chaotic. When I finished with the kitchen, I moved to the desk. It was an old metal thing, probably from the 70s, with 3 drawers on each side. I opened them one by one, checking what supplies I had to work with. The top drawers held pens, paper, maps. The middle ones had field guides, a compass, binoculars. When I opened the bottom left drawer, I found it empty, except for a single folded piece of paper tucked in the back. I pulled it out and unfolded it. The paper was yellowed with age, and the handwriting was messy, like someone had written it in a hurry. At the top, in all caps, it said "Rules for Survival." I snorted, dramatic much. But I kept reading. 1. Never leave the tower after dark. 2. Keep all windows shut past sunset. 3. Monitor any fires until crews show up. Don't take your eyes off them. 4. Don't answer phone calls between midnight and 3 a.m. 5. Never admit anyone you haven't specifically requested. I read through the list twice, then laughed out loud. This had to be a joke. Some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy. Probably this Thomas Garrett trying to freak out whoever came after him. I could picture it, mice. The guy sitting at this same desk writing out these rules with a smirk on his face, imagining some city slicker freaking out over mysterious phone calls and visitors in the middle of nowhere. The handwriting did look rushed, but not scared. More like he was hurrying to plant his little prank before leaving. Nice try, Thomas, I said to the empty room, folding the paper back up. I almost tossed it in the trash, but something made me put it back in the drawer instead. Maybe I'd show it to Hayes next time I saw him, get a laugh out of it. I walked to the windows and looked out at the forest stretching in every direction. The sun was starting to set, painting everything in gold and orange. It was beautiful, peaceful, exactly what I needed. For the first time since my mom died, I felt like I could breathe again. No more hospital rooms, no more sympathetic looks from friends who didn't know what to say. Just me and the mountains and the sky. I made myself a simple dinner of pasta and canned sauce, ate it while watching the sunset, then got ready for bed. It had been a long day, and tomorrow I'd start learning the actual job. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the wind in the trees and the occasional creak of the tower, I thought about those rules again, and smiled to myself. Keep all windows shut past sunset. Don't answer late-night phone calls. In a place with no cell service and probably no pranksters for 30 miles. Yeah, right. Thomas Garrett must have had a weird sense of humor. Or maybe he was just bored out of his mind up here. Either way, I wasn't about to let some made-up ghost stories get to me. I was here to do a job, and to get my head straight after everything that had happened. I rolled over and closed my eyes, letting the quiet of the forest lull me to sleep. Whatever happened to Thomas Garrett, whether he just got sick of the isolation and took off or something else, it had nothing to do with me. I was going to be just fine up here. I settled into a routine at the tower pretty quickly. The first couple of days were all about figuring out where everything was and how it all worked. Hayes had given me a rundown of my duties over the radio, scanning the horizon for smoke, logging weather conditions, and reporting anything unusual. It wasn't complicated work, but it required constant attention. By the third day, I'd mapped out a schedule for myself. Mornings started with coffee while I checked the weather instruments. Then I'd spend a few hours with the binoculars, methodically scanning each section of forest visible from the tower. Afternoons were for maintenance and record keeping. Evenings, I'd read or listened to music on my laptop until the battery got low. The generator was only for emergencies, so I had to be careful with power. The isolation didn't bother me much. After everything with Mom, the quiet was actually nice. No hospital beeps, no hushed conversations in hallways, no phone calls about test results, just wind in the trees and birds calling to each other. I even started sleeping better than I had in months. Then came the third night. I was almost asleep when I heard it, my name carried on the wind. David. I sat up, heart suddenly pounding. The voice was faint but clear, coming from somewhere in the forest below. "David, help me." I grabbed my flashlight from beside the bed and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness of the tower room as I moved to the window facing east, where the voice seemed to be coming from. "Please, I'm hurt." It was a man's voice, desperate and pained. I swept the flashlight beam across the tree line but couldn't see anyone. The forest was a wall of black beyond the small clearing around the tower. "David, I know you're up there." My hand was already on the doorknob when something clicked in my brain. The first rule on that yellowed paper: never leave the tower after dark, no matter what you hear. I froze, flashlight still in hand, my knuckles white around the doorknob. "Help me, I'm bleeding." The voice cracked with pain, and every instinct told me to run down those stairs and help whoever was out there. But something about the way it said my name made the hair on my arms stand up. "David Mitchell, please." How did they know my full name? I hadn't told anyone out here except Hayes. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The voice continued, growing more desperate. "I can see your light. I'm dying out here." I switched off the flashlight and moved away from the windows, sitting on the floor with my back against the bed frame. The pleas continued, sometimes fading as if the person was moving around the perimeter of the tower, sometimes so clear it sounded like they were right outside the windows. For 2 hours I sat there in the dark, listening to someone or something call my name and beg for help. I covered my ears, I hummed to myself, I even tried to sleep, but nothing drowned it out. The worst part was wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. What if it really was someone hurt out there? What if they died because I was too scared to help? But I remembered the rule, and I stayed put. Just before dawn, the voice finally stopped. When the first gray light filtered through the windows, I looked out in every direction. There was no one there. No signs of blood, no trampled undergrowth, nothing to suggest anyone had been outside the tower at all. I radioed Hayes that morning, but didn't mention the voices. What would I even say? That I'd heard someone calling for help but decided to ignore them because of some handwritten rules I'd found in a desk drawer. He'd think I was losing it already. The next week passed without incident. I started to think maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing, or maybe it had been some kind of auditory hallucination brought on by the isolation. I even wondered if Hayes or some other ranger had been testing me, seeing if I'd abandoned my post for an emergency. I went to bed on the 7th night feeling almost normal again. The evening had been warm, and I'd left one of the windows open a crack to let in the breeze. It was a small break in routine, but I didn't think much of it as I drifted off to sleep. The scratching woke me. At first it was so faint I thought it might be a branch scraping against the tower in the wind, but there was no wind that night. The air was completely still. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It moved slowly around the exterior wall, like fingernails dragging across the wood. I lay perfectly still, listening as it circled the tower once, then began a second lap. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate. Then came the pounding. A heavy thud against the north wall made me jump. Then another, and another. Whatever was out there was hitting the tower with enough force to make the whole structure vibrate slightly. The pounding moved, following the same path as the scratching, working its way around the tower. When it reached the east side where I'd left the window open, the pounding became more insistent, violent even. The whole tower seemed to shake with each impact. That's when I remembered the second rule: keep all windows closed and locked after sunset. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the open window. Through the narrow gap I could feel cold air flowing in, much colder than it should have been on a summer night. The pounding was directly below the window now, growing more frantic. With shaking hands, I slammed the window shut and twisted the lock into place. The moment the lock clicked, everything stopped. The pounding, the scratching, all of it, gone in an instant. The sudden silence was almost as terrifying as the noise had been. I stood there by the window, breathing hard, waiting for the sounds to resume, but they never did. Outside, the forest was quiet and still, as if nothing had happened. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat with my back against the wall, Thomas Garrett's list of rules clutched in my hand, reading them over and over until I had memorized every word. Those rules that I'd laughed at, that I'd dismissed as the ramblings of a man driven crazy by isolation. They suddenly seemed deadly serious. Whatever had been outside my tower those 2 nights, whatever had called my name and pounded on the walls, it wasn't human. And somehow Thomas Garrett had known about it. I thought about his disappearance, about what Hayes had told me. Had Garrett broken one of his own rules? Had he answered a midnight call or left the tower after dark to help a voice in the forest? As the sun rose, I took the list from the drawer and placed it on the desk where I could see it. These weren't suggestions or pranks. They were warnings, and from now on I was going to follow every single one of them. I was 2 weeks into my job at the lookout tower when I spotted it, a thin wisp of smoke rising from the forest about 10 miles to the northeast. I'd been scanning the horizon with my binoculars when I caught the faint gray plume against the clear blue sky. My heart rate picked up immediately. This was what I was here for. I grabbed the radio and called it in right away, following the protocol Hayes had drilled into me during orientation. "This is Mitchell at Lookout 7. I've got smoke at coordinates." I checked my map and rattled off the location. "Looks like it's just starting." "Over." Hayes' voice crackled back almost immediately. "Copy that, Mitchell. Good eye. I'll dispatch a crew to check it out. Keep monitoring and report any changes." "Over." "Will do." Over and out. I felt a little surge of pride, my first real fire spotting. I kept my eyes glued to that spot for the next hour, watching the smoke continue to rise. It wasn't growing dramatically, but it definitely wasn't going away either. According to the 3rd rule on that list I'd found, always monitor reported fires until crews arrive. I needed to stay vigilant. By hour 2, I was starting to wonder where the response team was. The smoke hadn't grown much, but it was still there, a persistent gray smudge against the green and blue. I called Hayes again. "Any update on that crew?" Smoke still visible from my position. "They're en route," Hayes said. "Should be there within the hour. Keep watching." I did, for 4 more hours. The whole time that smoke just hung there, not spreading but not dying either. It was weird. Forest fires usually either grow or die out. This one was just existing, and there was still no sign of any response team. No helicopters, no vehicles on the access roads I could see through my binoculars. After 6 hours of watching, my eyes were strained and my back was stiff. I called Hayes again. "Hayes, it's Mitchell. I still don't see any response team at the fire site. Smoke's still visible. What's the status?" "Over." There was a longer pause this time before Hayes responded. "Mitchell, we didn't send anyone out. No other lookouts confirmed your sighting." "Over." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I've been watching it for 6 hours. It's right there at the coordinates I gave you. We checked those coordinates from other angles. Nothing there, Mitchell. Maybe it was just morning fog or dust." "Over." I turned back to the window, binoculars raised to my eyes again. The smoke was gone, completely vanished. I scanned the entire area where I'd been watching all day. Nothing but trees and clear sky. "I don't understand," I said into the radio. "It was just there. It happens sometimes," Hayes said, his voice flat. "Light plays tricks in the mountains. Get some rest, Mitchell." Over and out. I spent the rest of the day feeling uneasy. I knew what I'd seen. It wasn't a trick of the light or morning fog. It was smoke, real smoke that had been there for 6 hours, and then vanished the moment I called Hayes that last time. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. I kept thinking about the smoke and how it had disappeared, about how no one else had seen it. Was I losing it already? Only 2 weeks in and I was seeing things. I finally drifted off around midnight, but I didn't stay asleep for long. The phone rang at exactly 1 in the morning. I know because I checked my watch as soon as the shrill ring cut through the silence of the tower. I sat up in bed, momentarily disoriented. Who would be calling at this hour? The phone rang again, and I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My hand was halfway to the receiver when I remembered the 4th rule: never answer the phone after midnight. I pulled my hand back like the phone had suddenly turned red hot. The ringing continued, loud and insistent in the quiet tower. I backed away from it, my heart pounding in my chest. The phone kept ringing, and ringing, and ringing. I sat on my bed, staring at it. There was something about that ring that made me want to answer it. Not just curiosity, but an actual pull, like the phone was calling specifically to me, and it was important that I pick it up. But I remembered the rule. I remembered it, and I stayed put. For a full hour that phone rang. 60 minutes of that shrill, demanding sound, and the whole time I felt that strange urge to answer it, growing stronger with each ring. When it finally stopped, the silence felt almost as loud as the ringing had been. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next night, it happened again. 1 a.m. on the dot, the phone started ringing, and again, I felt that pull to answer it. Stronger this time, like there was a string tied around my wrist, tugging me toward the receiver. I resisted. For the next 5 nights, the same thing happened. Always at 1 in the morning. Always for exactly 1 hour. And each night, the compulsion to answer grew stronger. On the 7th night, I almost gave in. I was so tired by then. A week of interrupted sleep and constant anxiety had worn me down. When the phone started its nightly ritual, I found myself walking toward it without even making a conscious decision to do so. My hand reached for the receiver. I could almost hear a voice in my head saying, "Pick it up, just pick it up. It's important." My fingers were less than an inch from the black plastic when I suddenly remembered something Hayes had told me during orientation, something I'd almost forgotten. "We lost 3 lookouts from this region in the last decade," he'd said. "All of them reported strange calls in the middle of the night before they disappeared. We found their towers empty, beds still made, like they just walked out into the night and never came back." I yanked my hand back and stumbled away from the phone. It kept ringing, but I covered my ears and huddled in the corner of the room until the hour was up and it finally stopped. The next morning, I called Hayes on the radio. "The phone's been ringing at night," I told him. "Every night for a week, always at 1 in the morning." There was a long pause before Hayes responded. "Don't answer it, Mitchell. Whatever you do, don't answer that phone after midnight." "I haven't," I said. "But what is it? Who's calling?" Another pause. "We don't know. The lines show no incoming calls during those hours. But every lookout who's ever answered one of those calls has left their post that same night, walked out into the forest in the dark, and they never came back." I finished for him. "No," Hayes said quietly. "They never came back." I thought about Thomas Garrett then, the previous lookout whose rules I'd found. Had he answered the phone? Or had he written those rules because he knew what happened to those who did? Either way, I was grateful for that list. It had already saved my life once. Maybe twice, if the smoke I'd seen was somehow connected to all this. I looked at the phone sitting innocently on my desk. It was just a regular phone during the day, but at night, it became something else. Something that wanted me to answer it. Something that wanted me to leave the safety of my tower and walk into the dark forest. I wasn't going to let that happen. I'd follow the rules, all of them, no matter what I saw or heard, no matter how strong the urge got to break them. I just had to make it through the rest of my assignment. Then I could leave this place behind. If I was lucky. I'd been at the lookout tower for a month now. The days had settled into a routine that kept me busy enough. But the nights were something else entirely. I was getting used to the voices and the phone calls, as much as anyone could get used to that kind of thing. But this morning was different. I was scanning the eastern ridge with my binoculars when I caught movement on the stairs leading up to my tower. At first, I thought it might be a deer or some other animal, but as I focused, I could clearly make out a human figure climbing the steps. The person wore what looked like a ranger uniform, the same forest green that Hayes wore when I first met him. My heart started pounding. In the month I'd been here, no one had visited. Hayes had mentioned that supply drops came every 6 weeks, and I was still 2 weeks away from that. I set down my binoculars and moved to the window facing the stairs. The man was about halfway up now. He moved with purpose, taking the steps 2 at a time. Something about his movements seemed off, too smooth, too deliberate. "Hello up there," he called when he noticed me watching. His voice carried easily in the still morning air. "Forest Service, need to check some equipment." I didn't respond. The 5th rule on Thomas's list flashed in my mind. Never let anyone into the tower who claims to be a ranger, maintenance worker, or hiker, no matter how convincing they seem. "Hey there," he called again, continuing his climb. "Got a work order to check your radio equipment. Having some issues with the network. Mind opening up when I get there?" He sounded friendly enough, professional, but something in my gut told me this wasn't right. Hayes would have radioed ahead if someone was coming up. I moved to the door and slid the deadbolt into place. Then I grabbed the phone and dialed Hayes's direct line at the ranger station. My hands were shaking so badly I had to dial twice. Ranger station, Hayes speaking. His gruff voice was the most welcome sound I'd heard in weeks. "Hayes, it's Mitchell at Tower 7, I said, keeping my voice low. "There's a man climbing the stairs to my tower right now. Says he's Forest Service, here to check equipment." There was a pause on the line. "Mitchell, we don't have anyone scheduled for Tower 7 today. No one should be there." My mouth went dry. "He's wearing a ranger uniform." "Listen carefully," Hayes said, his voice dropping. "Do not open that door. Not for any reason." "Is it locked?" "Yes." "Good. Stay inside. Keep it locked. If he doesn't leave in a reasonable amount of time, call me back." "What if he tries to break in?" I asked. "He won't," Hayes said with a certainty that chilled me. "Just don't open the door. I'll try to get someone out there, but it's going to take a few hours at minimum." The man had reached the top of the stairs now. I could see him clearly through the window, tall, broad-shouldered, with a ranger hat pulled low over his face. He knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps. "Forest Service, open up please." I hung up the phone and backed away from the door. "Sorry," I called out. "I just spoke with Ranger Hayes. He says there's no scheduled maintenance today." The man was quiet for a moment, then he laughed, a sound that didn't quite match his appearance. "There must be some miscommunication. I've got the work order right here. Just need 15 minutes to check your equipment. I'm sorry, but I can't let you in without confirmation from my supervisor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He knocked again, harder this time. "Come on, buddy. Don't make me climb all these stairs for nothing. Just open up." I didn't respond. I moved to the window where I could see him without being too obvious. He stood at the door, perfectly still, head tilted slightly as if listening. Then he tried the handle, jiggling it a few times. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice different now, lower, with an edge to it. "Open the door." I remained silent, watching him. He began pacing back and forth on the small landing, occasionally looking out at the forest below. Then he'd return to the door, knock again, and repeat his request. Each time, his tone shifted slightly, sometimes friendly, sometimes authoritative, sometimes almost pleading. For 3 hours this continued. I watched him from different windows as he circled the tower, looking up at me occasionally. Sometimes he'd stand completely still for 20 or 30 minutes, just staring at the door. Other times, he'd pace or sit on the top step, as if waiting for me to change my mind. The whole time, I kept thinking about Thomas Garrett. Had he opened the door for someone like this? Was that why he disappeared? Finally, after what felt like forever, the man stood up from where he'd been sitting. He looked directly at the window where I was watching, though I was sure he couldn't see me through the reflection, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "I'll be seeing you," he said clearly, then turned and descended the stairs. I watched him all the way down, then followed his progress as he walked across the clearing and into the tree line. Even after he disappeared from view, I kept watching, half expecting him to reappear. When I was sure he was gone, I called Hayes again. "He just left," I told him. "He was here for 3 hours, just waiting." Hayes let out a long breath. "You did good, Mitchell. Real good. I'm sending someone out tomorrow to check on you. A Ranger Wilson. He'll radio ahead and give you a password we'll establish now. The password is Lookout 7 clear. Anyone who doesn't know that password, you keep that door locked. Understood?" "Yes, sir," I said. What was that? Who was he?" Hayes was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he finally said. "But you're not the first lookout to report something like this. Just keep following the rules. They're there for a reason." After I hung up, I sat down at my desk and stared at Thomas's list of rules. They'd seemed so strange when I first found them, but now they made perfect sense. They were a lifeline. The next day, no Ranger Wilson showed up. When I radioed Hayes about it, he had no idea what I was talking about. He'd never sent anyone, and there was no Ranger Wilson on staff. Over the next month, things got worse. The voices that had called to me occasionally now became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes they sounded like random hikers or lost campers. Other times, They were more personal. "David, honey, please help me." My mother's voice exactly as it had sounded in her final days, weak and pained. "I'm so cold out here." The first time I heard it, I nearly broke. I pressed my hands against my ears and repeated to myself, "It's not her, it's not her," until the voice finally stopped. Despite the summer heat, I kept all windows locked after sunset, just as the rules dictated. Some nights, the temperature in the tower would climb to nearly 90 degrees, but I'd rather sweat than break that rule again. The false fires continued too. I'd spot smoke rising from different parts of the forest, call it in, only to have it vanish when I looked back. After the third time, Hayes stopped sending crews out based solely on my reports. He required confirmation from other lookouts first. "It's not just you," he assured me during one radio call. "Tower 3 and Tower 5 have reported the same thing. Just keep logging them and calling them in." The midnight phone calls grew more frequent too. Sometimes the phone would ring all night, stopping only when the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. I never answered, no matter how tempting it became. And there were more visitors. A woman in hiking gear who claimed she was lost and needed water. A maintenance crew in a truck that looked almost, but not quite, like the Forest Service vehicles. 2 men in ranger uniforms who said they needed to inspect the tower for structural damage after a storm that had never happened. I turned them all away. I never opened the door, never let anyone in. Some left quickly. Others, like that first man, would stay for hours, trying different tactics to get me to open up. One night, as I lay in bed listening to what sounded like a group of hikers calling for help below my tower, I realized something that sent a chill through me despite the heat. Whatever was out there, whatever was pretending to be rangers and hikers and even my dead mother, it was learning, adapting. Each attempt to get inside was more sophisticated than the last, and it was getting more persistent. I wondered how long I could hold out, how long before exhaustion or a moment of weakness led me to break one of the rules, how long before I ended up like Thomas Garrett, just another name on a list of lookouts who disappeared. But for now, I was still here, still alive, still following the rules, and the door remained locked. I'd been at the lookout tower for a month now, and things were getting worse, way worse. What started as occasional strange occurrences had turned into a constant barrage of unexplainable events that left me exhausted, paranoid, and questioning my own sanity. The false fires were the most frustrating. I'd spot smoke rising from different parts of the forest, call it in to Hayes, only to have him tell me that no other lookouts confirmed the sighting. Then the smoke would vanish like it had never been there at all. But now, instead of one phantom fire at a time, I was seeing 2 or 3 simultaneously, scattered across my patrol zone. Mitchell to base. I've got smoke at coordinates. I paused, checking my map again. Northeast quadrant, Sector 4, and also West quadrant, Sector 7. The radio crackled. Base to Mitchell. No other lookouts have confirmed either sighting. Continue monitoring. I rubbed my eyes, which felt like they had sand in them. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in days. The phone had started ringing not just at midnight, but throughout the day too. Sometimes it would ring for hours, stopping only when I was ready to lose my mind, then starting up again just as I began to relax. The voices were the worst. They'd circle the tower at night, calling my name, pleading for help, threatening me, or sometimes just whispering things I couldn't quite make out. They used to stop before dawn, but lately they'd continue until the sun was fully up, making sleep impossible. I looked at my reflection in the small bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. My face had grown gaunt, cheekbones jutting out sharply. I'd had to punch a new hole in my belt to keep my pants up. The headaches were constant now, a dull throbbing behind my eyes that spiked into blinding pain whenever the phone rang, or the voices got particularly loud. "You're fine," I told my reflection. "Just follow the rules. You'll be fine." But I wasn't fine, not even close. By the 8th week I was running on fumes. I'd developed a system of micronaps throughout the day, never letting myself fall into deep sleep. I kept Thomas's list of rules taped to the wall next to my bed, next to the desk, and on the bathroom mirror. I wasn't taking any chances. Then came the night when everything went to hell at once. It started with the voices at sunset, Usually they'd begin with just one or two, but this time they erupted from every direction simultaneously, a chorus of desperate pleas and angry demands. "David, please. I'm hurt. Open the door, Mitchell. You can't stay in there forever." I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voices seemed to penetrate right through my hands, through the walls of the tower, directly into my brain. Then the phone started ringing. Not the usual steady ring, but an urgent, frantic sound that made my teeth hurt. I glanced at it, the urge to answer nearly overwhelming. My hand actually twitched toward it before I pulled back. I forced myself to look out the windows, scanning the forest as I'd been trained to do. That's when I saw the fire's 3 distinct columns of smoke rising from different parts of the forest, all within my patrol zone. One to the north, one to the southeast, and one almost directly west. "This isn't real," I muttered to myself. "None of this is real." But when I looked down at the base of the tower, what I saw made my blood run cold. 2 people in ranger uniforms were standing there, looking up at me. Next to them was a third person in hiking gear, carrying a large backpack. "Hey," one of the rangers called up. "Mitchell, we need to come up and check the equipment." The hiker waved frantically. "Please help. I'm lost, and it's getting dark. I've been walking for hours." The second ranger pulled out what looked like official paperwork. "We have orders from Hayes, emergency maintenance." I backed away from the window, my heart hammering in my chest. All 5 types of incidents at once. This had never happened before. The voices, the phone, the fires, people claiming to be rangers, and now someone pretending to be a lost hiker. It was like whatever was out there had decided to throw everything at me at once. I grabbed the radio. "Mitchell, to base. Mitchell to base." Nothing but static. I tried again. "Mitchell to base. Come in, Hayes." More static, then a faint voice that might have been Hayes, but I couldn't make out the words. The pounding started, then that's heavy fists on the door at the top of the stairs. The whole tower seemed to shake with each impact. "Open up, Mitchell. That's an order." I retreated to the bathroom, the only room in the tower without windows. I dragged the small dresser from beside my bed and wedged it against the bathroom door. Then I sat on the closed toilet lid, radio clutched in my trembling hands, and kept trying to reach Hayes. "Mitchell to base. Emergency. Mitchell to base." After what felt like hours, the radio finally crackled to life with Hayes's voice coming through clearly. "Base to Mitchell. What's your situation?" "Hayes, thank God," I gasped. "There are people here claiming to be rangers. There's someone saying they're a lost hiker. The voices are everywhere. The phone won't stop ringing, and I can see 3 fires from my position." There was a pause, then Hayes's voice came back, sounding urgent. "Mitchell, listen carefully. There's a severe storm system moving in fast. Category 4, possibly upgrading to 5. You need to evacuate immediately. I'm sending a helicopter to the clearing north of your position. You have 20 minutes to get there before conditions make extraction impossible." I froze. This didn't sound right. A storm. But the sky is clear. I can see the stars. The system is moving faster than predicted. "Trust me, Mitchell. You need to get out now." "That's an order." Something clicked in my brain. I moved to the bathroom window, a tiny thing barely big enough to stick my head out of Mitchell, and looked at the sky, perfectly clear with a full moon and thousands of stars visible. No clouds, no wind, nothing that suggested an approaching storm. I checked the weather radio. No alerts, no warnings, nothing about any storm system in the area. "Mitchell, are you there? Acknowledge the evacuation order." I took a deep breath. "Hayes, there's no storm. The sky is clear." "Damn it, Mitchell. I'm looking at the radar right now. This is not a drill. Get to the extraction point, or you're going to die in that tower." The pounding on the door grew louder. The voices outside rose to a screaming pitch. The phone's ring seemed to drill into my skull. And suddenly, I understood. This was another test. All of it. The rangers, the hiker, the fires, Hayes's evacuation order. It was all trying to get me to break the rules, to leave the tower after dark, to open the door to someone claiming to be a ranger, to answer the phone. "I'm not leaving the tower," I said firmly into the radio. "And I'm not opening the door. Mitchell, You're making a fatal mistake. The storm will tear that tower apart with you in it. No, I said, more to myself than to Hayes. No, I'm staying right here. Mitchell, Mitchell, respond. I set the radio down on the edge of the sink and covered my ears again. The pounding on the door, the ringing phone, the voices, Hayes's frantic calls over the radio. It all blended together into a cacophony of noise that threatened to drive me insane. But I stayed put. I wasn't going to break the rules. Not now. Not after everything I'd been through. Hours passed. My watch said it was 3 in the morning when I finally worked up the courage to leave the bathroom. The tower was silent. The phone had stopped ringing. The pounding on the door had ceased. Even the voices were gone. I moved cautiously to the window and looked out. The night was still clear, still peaceful. No fires burned in the distance. No rangers or hikers stood at the base of the tower. I picked up the radio again. Mitchell to base. After a moment, Hayes's voice came through, sounding normal. Base to Mitchell. Go ahead. Sir, about that evacuation order. What evacuation order? Mitchell. It's 3 in the morning. Is everything all right up there? I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall for support. Just checking in, sir. Everything's fine. Get some sleep, Mitchell. You sound terrible. Yes, sir. I put the radio down and looked around the tower. Everything was exactly as it should be. No sign of the chaos that had engulfed me just hours before. I walked to the window and stared out at the moonlit forest. Whatever was testing me had thrown everything it had at me tonight, and I'd passed. I hadn't broken the rules. But I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of something worse. I could feel it in my bones, in the persistent headache that had become my constant companion, in the hollow pit of my stomach that food couldn't seem to fill anymore. I returned to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, too wired to sleep despite my exhaustion. I'd stay here until dawn. I decided. It felt safer somehow. This small room, with its single tiny window and solid door. Outside, the forest waited in silence, watching, planning its next move. I huddled in the bathroom, my back pressed against the cold porcelain of the tub. The dresser I'd shoved against the door wasn't much of a barricade, but it was all I had. My hands trembled as I clutched the radio, the only connection I had to the real world outside this nightmare. The voices outside the bathroom door grew louder, more insistent. They weren't just calling my name anymore, they were screaming it, the sound bouncing off the walls of the tower. David, you need to come out now. The fire's getting closer. Mitchell, this is a direct order. Evacuate immediately. Please, I'm hurt. I need help. Just open the door. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it didn't help. The voices seemed to seep through my fingers, worming their way into my head. The phone in the main room rang without stopping, a shrill, demanding sound that made my teeth ache. I knew if I answered it, whatever was happening would only get worse. They're not real, I whispered to myself. None of this is real, but it felt real. The tower shook as something heavy slammed against the outer walls. I could hear multiple sets of footsteps now, moving around outside the bathroom. The dresser shifted slightly as something pushed against the door. We can see the fire from here. A voice called, this one sounding exactly like Hayes. It's less than a mile away. You need to evacuate now, Mitchell. I squeezed my eyes shut. There was no fire. I'd checked the weather radio earlier. No alerts, no storms, no fires. The sky had been clear. This was just another test, like the fake ranger who'd tried to get me to open the door. The radio in my hand crackled with static. I tried again to reach the real Hayes, but all I got was garbled noise and fragments of words that might have been my name. The pounding on the bathroom door started, making the dresser jump with each impact. Mitchell, open this door right now. David, please. We're trying to help you. The fire's coming. You'll die if you stay. I tucked myself further into the corner between the tub and the wall. My head throbbed with each shout, each ring of the phone, each crash against the tower. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept properly. Days, weeks, the exhaustion pulled at me, making my thoughts fuzzy around the edges. I'm not opening the door, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I'm not leaving the tower. Something scraped against the bathroom window, fingernails or claws, I couldn't tell. I didn't look. Rule 3. Don't look directly at anything you see outside the windows after dark. The noise outside grew to a deafening roar. Multiple voices shouted over each other. The phone rang continuously, and now there was a new sound, a crackling, like flames. The air in the bathroom felt hot and thick, making it hard to breathe. "I can smell smoke," I muttered, panic rising in my chest. Was there actually a fire? Had I made a terrible mistake? No, this was exactly what they wanted me to think. Whatever they were, the things pretending to be rangers, the voices in the night, they wanted me to break the rules, to open the door, to leave the tower after dark. That's what had happened to Thomas Garrett. I was sure of it now. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. Hours passed. My throat was raw from thirst, my back ached from sitting on the hard floor, and my head pounded with every heartbeat. But I stayed put, clutching the radio like a lifeline. Sometime in the middle of the night, the chaos reached a fever pitch. The entire tower seemed to shake on its foundation. The voices became so numerous and overlapped so much that I couldn't make out individual words anymore, just a wall of desperate, angry sound. The phone's ring changed to a harsh, continuous buzz. The scratching at the window became frantic, like something was trying to claw its way in. I curled into a ball, covering my ears and squeezing my eyes shut. Not real, not real, not real, I chanted to myself, though I couldn't even hear my own voice over the cacophony. And then, as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the small bathroom window, everything stopped. The sudden silence was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I thought I'd gone deaf. I slowly lowered my hands from my ears, listening. Nothing. No voices, no phone, no scratching, no footsteps. Just the normal sounds of the tower, the creak of the wood as it warmed in the morning sun, the distant call of birds. I waited another hour before I dared to move the dresser away from the door. My muscles screamed in protest as I stood up, stiff from sitting in the same position all night. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. Slowly, carefully, I opened the bathroom door and peered out. The main room of the tower was exactly as I'd left it. The phone sat innocently on its cradle. The windows were still locked and intact. There were no signs of fire, no smoke damage, no evidence that anything unusual had happened during the night. I moved to the windows and looked out. The forest stretched peaceful and green in all directions. No smoke columns, no fires, no people climbing the stairs to the tower. Everything was normal. I picked up the radio and tried again to contact base. Tower 7 to base. Come in. To my surprise, Hayes answered immediately, his voice clear and normal. Base to Tower 7. Go ahead. Just checking in, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Everything okay down there? All quiet, Hayes replied. You sound rough, Mitchell. Everything all right up there? I hesitated. Did you issue any evacuation orders last night? Any reports of fires near Tower 7? Negative, Hayes said, sounding confused. Weather was clear all night. No fires, no evacuations. Why do you ask? I sank into the chair by the desk. No reason. Just a weird dream, I guess. After signing off, I sat there for a long time, staring at the list of rules on my desk. They'd saved my life last night. I was certain of that now. Later that day, Hayes radioed again. Mitchell, given what you've been experiencing up there, I can arrange a transfer if you want. No shame in it. That tower's got a history. I thought about it. The idea of leaving, of going back to civilization, was tempting. But something told me that whatever had been testing me last night wasn't finished, and if I left, someone else would take my place, someone who might not have the rules. Thanks, but I'll finish my contract, I told him. I'm good. The strange occurrences continued over the next few weeks. The phone still rang at 1 in the morning, voices still called my name on windless nights, and occasionally I'd spot smoke where there couldn't possibly be fires. But nothing ever matched the intensity of that night in the 8th week. I followed the rules religiously. Windows locked after sunset, never left the tower after dark, never answered the phone after midnight, never looked directly at anything I saw outside the windows, never let anyone in who claimed to be a ranger. When my replacement finally arrived at the end of my contract, I watched him climb the stairs with a mixture of relief and concern. He was young, probably fresh out of college, with an eager smile and a backpack full of books. Before I left, I placed the list of rules in the bottom left drawer of the desk, exactly where I'd found them. I considered warning him directly, but something told me that wouldn't work. The rules had to be discovered, just as I had discovered them. As I drove away from Tower 7 for the last time, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The tower stood tall against the blue sky, looking perfectly normal and harmless, but I knew better now. I wasn't the same person who had driven up that service road all those months ago. The isolation, the fear, the constant vigilance, they had changed me, but I was alive. I had followed the rules, and I had survived. Whatever waited in the forest around Tower 7 would have to find another victim. It wouldn't be me.